Good. So, we're coming towards the big crescendo of the night. A crescendo. But before we get to that, I have been remiss in not mentioning Tower Hamlets and Bow. Let's give it up for Tower Hamlets and Bow, because they are part of Uma's constituency. Woo! Okay, so my last job of tonight is to introduce to you my very good friend, Wes Streeting, who is going to be an amazing Secretary of State for Health in our new Labour government. He's going to have a massively difficult job, I know, but him and Jazz together turned Redbridge red, and I know that he's going to put the same commitment, the same energy, and even more work into making sure our NHS works well. So I want you to give it up, Wes Streeting. Woo!
Thank you so much, Lynn. It's really good to be on home turf in Redbridge, because for the last 4 weeks I have been travelling to every corner of England campaigning in the battleground seats that we need to win in order to win the next general election. And I really hope that in 2 weeks' time, just 2 weeks' time, we will have achieved something that has only ever been achieved 3 times in Labour's history, where we go from opposition to majority Labour government. That's what we can do in 2 weeks' time. And if we are able to do that, we can finally deliver the country the change that we desperately need. And nowhere is the Conservatives' failure more evident than in our National Health Service, that only last year celebrated its 80th anniversary at what should have been a moment of celebration and joy. And yet, we mark that anniversary against the bleak backdrop of its worst crisis in history. The longest waiting lists, the lowest patient satisfaction, and this week we've been reminded that the failures in the NHS aren't just a matter of right and wrong, but a matter of life and death, where people are dying in accident and emergency departments that are designed to save them because the NHS couldn't get to them in time, where people are dying on NHS waiting lists at record levels because the NHS couldn't get to them in time. And I know, as a cancer survivor myself, having gone through kidney cancer just a few years ago, that it was because the NHS got to me in time that I am now cancer-free, and hopefully have a long life ahead. And yet my friend and constituent, Nathaniel Thaai, who lives 10 minutes up the road in Hainault, because he was diagnosed at stage 4 with bowel cancer, he knows, however great the care he's receiving is, and it is really great, loving care, his cancer is a certain death sentence. That's the difference between an NHS that's there for us when we need it and an NHS that doesn't reach us in time. And last night on Question Time, we saw again proof that the Conservatives cannot be trusted, are not able to turn this crisis around. When Rishi Sunak turned to the audience and said, "It's improving, It's going in the right direction, even though NHS waiting lists are higher now than they were when he became Prime Minister, even though on latest statistics they're going up, not down. He boasts that we've never spent so much on the NHS, as if it's the amount of money we spend that's the most important benchmark of success, rather than whether or not people's lives are saved, whether they're able to get the treatment they need, when they need it, where they need it. For me, it's the outcomes that matter, not the amount of money we're pouring in, important though that is. And I feel like at this election, the difference between a Labour government and a Conservative government is the difference between real change with the party that created the NHS, founded the NHS, has the best record on the NHS, being back, able to give our country its NHS's future back, or handing the matches back to the arsonist to finish the job, which is what the Conservatives will do if they are given an unprecedented fifth term. And if you want proof of that, look at NHS dentistry. Now a poor service for poor people, where the rest of us who can afford it go private and those who can't are left behind. That's the future for our entire National Health Service if the Conservatives are given a fifth term. And I know that they are out there right now telling the country that you don't need to bother voting on July the 4th. Change has already happened. Labour's won this election. That's what cabinet ministers are saying on the airwaves now, because they hope that Labour voters will either stay at home, or people who might consider voting Labour will vote for smaller parties and independents instead, because they know that someone else has done the important job of choosing change in a Labour government. You only get change if you vote for it. And in the next 2 weeks, it's up to all of us to take that message to every doorstep, in every seat we need to win in order to form a Labour government. Because otherwise, we will wake up to the nightmare on Downing Street of Rishi Sunak and his smug face walking back in, the chaos continuing, the circus performing, and our economy, our public services, and trust in politics itself plummeting to new depths. That's not a future I want to see. I know that's not a future you want to see. And together we're on the brink of doing something quite remarkable in the next 2 weeks, where if, and it's still if we have a Labour government on July the 5th, we can get to work straight away, delivering 40,000 more appointments every week to cut NHS waiting lists, doubling the number of scanners so that cancer patients like me get faster diagnosis, earlier treatment, mental health support in every primary and secondary school in the country, 8,500 mental health workers to cut mental health waiting lists, walk-in mental health centres in every community in our country, 700,000 more emergency dentistry appointments as the first step to rebuilding NHS dentistry rather than giving up on it. Any one of those individual policies would make a real difference. Taken together, they are the foundations of a real plan to rebuild our country's National Health Service. And alongside that, we have a determination to build our country's first ever National Care Service too. That's the change we can make if we get a Labour government in 2 weeks' time. But of course, there's an issue that's brought us all here together this evening. Of course, there's a person who's brought us all here together this evening. I'll come on to talk about her in a moment. I've got some stories to tell. But there's a really important issue that's brought us all together this evening, and that's the issue of human rights in Sri Lanka. In the last 9 years that I've been privileged to be the Member of Parliament for Ilford North, and actually over the course of the last 14 years that I've had the privilege of being an elected representative in the London Borough of Redbridge, I've come to know our Tamil community really well. And thanks to the leadership of people like Councillor Jayaranjan, who's here with us this evening, our first Tamil Mayor of the London Borough of Redbridge, thanks to our local Tamil community, who give so much to the politics, the commerce, the culture of this borough and of our country, I've learned something of the Sri Lankan Civil War. A war where the world looked the other way as the most unspeakable human rights abuses and atrocities were committed. A war that, as David Miliband described it as Foreign Secretary, without witness, because the world looked the other way. And I've learned with humility and actually shame about the failures of our international community during that bloody civil war, of the consequences, the scars, literal scars, but also the mental scars that families still carry today as a result of the loved ones that were lost, the family members that disappeared in one of the most brutal and bloody conflicts of modern times. And through that learning, I made it my focus as a Member of Parliament to campaign for truth, for justice and accountability on the international stage, to hold to account the perpetrators of those human rights abuses in the Sri Lankan Civil War, and to make sure that we send a message to current and future tyrants that there is no hiding place and no escape for accountability. And for a while, it felt like we were really making progress. I talked about David Miliband. I actually thought when he was Prime Minister that David Cameron really focused on this issue too. And it felt like we were making progress at the UN. And I went out to the UN Human Rights Council many times. In fact, I remember the last flight I took before the pandemic into Geneva, as the airports were empty, there was this new virus and people were choosing to stay home. And I went to Geneva anyway, because I knew it was really important to keep Sri Lanka on the UN Human Rights Council's agenda. And I really felt like we were making progress. We were achieving something. We even got the government of Sri Lanka to sign up to a resolution that called for an independent judicial mechanism and an independent investigation into historic human rights abuses in Sri Lanka. We were making progress. And since then, we know what's happened. The progress has stalled and it's slammed into reverse. The Rajapaksas have returned. The very people who were responsible for human rights abuses in the Sri Lankan Civil War are not only back in power, but as we know, they continue to perpetrate human rights abuses to this day. This is not a historic injustice, it's an ongoing injustice. And it's up to us to keep this on the agenda. And one of the things I wanted to say to all of you this evening, who've turned up to lobbies of Parliament, who've educated politicians like myself through our advice surgeries, inviting us into the temple, having community meetings, you've made such an impact. The Tamil diaspora in our country isn't the largest community, the largest minority community, but you've made your voice heard. And yes, there are lots of parliamentarians like myself, like Lynn Brown, like Stephen Timms, like Gareth Thomas, like Siobhan McDonough, who've spoken up for our Tamil constituents. But there are so many more parliamentarians who have few or no Tamil constituents, who have heard your cries for justice, who have heard your calls for accountability and are with you 100%, including our Shadow Foreign Secretary and I hope our next Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, and including our current leader and I hope our next Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. So you know, if we have a Labour government in 2 weeks' time, human rights abuses in Sri Lanka, historic and current, will be at the top of Labour's foreign policy and human rights agenda. And we will have new parliamentary colleagues like Jazz Athol, who will be the next Member of Parliament for Ilford South. James Asser, the next Member of Parliament for West Ham and Beckton. And of course, the next Member of Parliament for Stratford and Bow. Because Uma has decided to take on both the London boroughs of Newham and Tower Hamlets. Famously, those sleepy London boroughs, where politics is always straightforward. But let me say about Uma, better late than never. We were parliamentary candidates together in 2015. It was a tough election for Labour. We fought our level best, and we got different results. But I never had any doubt whatsoever that Uma would find her way to Westminster, because she is a formidable campaigner, she's a trailblazer, and she will be such a strong Member of Parliament. And you know that she will be a strong voice for the Tamil people, and I hope an inspiration and a role model for other Tamil people to follow, as Thangam Debonair has been our Labour MP in Bristol. But she will be a strong Member of Parliament for all of the communities of Stratford and Bow, and she will have, alongside her, Labour MPs, and I hope a Labour government that will deliver the justice, the truth, the accountability that the Tamil community deserve, and a Labour government that will give Britain its economy back, its public services back, and its trust in politics back. That's what we're both standing for at this election, and that's what a Labour government will deliver. So, in conclusion, let me just end by saying this. It's great to have so many people here from Redbridge, from Ilford North and Ilford South here this evening. It's so wonderful to welcome friends from across East London, from across North London, and actually from far further afield to support this outstanding... We don't talk about Harrow. Just keep it to the right side of London here. But, you know, if you are here, great. But no, it's, in all seriousness, it's great to have people from right across London and right across the country here this evening. Let's not leave anything to chance in the next fortnight. Let's put everything we've got out there on the pitch. Because the great thing about where we sit this evening and the opportunity that lies before us is that when we're up on election night and those results come in, for every single one of those seats that flashes up, Labour hold or Labour gain, we in this room will be able to say, all of you will be able to say, that you did that. If you see Keir Starmer walking into Downing Street in 2 weeks' time as the first Labour opposition leader in 27 years to do so, only the fourth in our party's entire history to do so, you will be able to say that you did that. And that means that every single change that Labour government makes, from lifting children out of poverty, to getting our NHS back on its feet and making it fit for the future, to making our streets safe again, halving violence against women and girls, and helping our country to stand tall on the international stage as a beacon of human rights, freedom and democracy in every part of the world, in every corner of the world, you will be able to say that you did that. Politics is a team sport. We are so proud to be part of this team. We're so proud you're part of this team. So let's give it everything in the next fortnight so we get the Tories out, Starmer in, and a Labour government changing our country once again.